Okay, welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. Back from our August break. Let's see if we remember how to do this, John.
We'll find out the hard way, I guess, right?
So I'm Dan Tilson, your host, and over there we have John Byram. Of course, on this podcast, we are talking to all people who have not yet felt fully at home in the Catholic Church. And the longer we do this, the more and more people we meet that fall into that category. So, John, what did you do over August?
I worked while other people traveled the world. I stayed home and traveled our lovely Mid-Atlantic area. The one cool thing is I did go to my favorite band's concert. I took my sister and my nephew. It was his first time on the floor in a pit, in a mosh pit, if you will. He has come to love this band as well. Spoiler alert for anyone who knows me. They already know who this band is. It's Linkin Park.
No surprises here.
No
for anyone that knows you.
Anyone who knows me. So yeah, I went to go see Linkin Park again, and my nephew absolutely loved it. And I got to leave with a little souvenir. And then this is going to be my one gloating story. Here's pre-COVID, I took my sister to go see Bring Me the Horizon at our alma mater. And she left that show with a black eye because she got hit in the face by a drumstick that was thrown into the crowd by the drummer.
Yikes.
I, on the other hand, in our show for Linkin Park up in Philadelphia in August, I caught the drumstick that was thrown into the pit, which was really cool. Colin, the drummer for Linkin Park, tossed several sticks in there, and he threw it in there like after the sixth song of the set. And I caught it, and I instantly, like 14-year-old John had like an absolute internal meltdown, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I actually have it here on my desk.
You showed me that thing right before we started, and it is beat up.
It is. It's used.
Do you think that was only used in one show?
Oh, easily. Yeah. Because I believe the last thing I read is the average drummer goes through, like, depending upon how long their set is, anywhere between like 5 to 10 sets of drumsticks.
That's kind of nuts. I didn't realize that. I don't think I've told you this before. So in 8th grade at Queen of Apostles Middle School, our music teacher had all of us present the song of the summer, something that represented us, and we had to play it for the class. And then we had to give a little lecture. This may surprise you. I chose a song from Linkin Park.
Did you really?
Any just wild guess what it might have been?
Give me the year.
Oh, I don't remember the year. I mean, 2005 was when I was...
Okay. So 2005, that would have been Meteora time frame.
Yeah.
Meteora would have been Somewhere I Belong.
It wasn't.
Was it Numb?
It was Numb, but now I'm trying to remember, it was Numb. So that was like 2003, 2004.
Numb is a very, very good song, yes.
And it's crazy. I'm not sure I even realized why that represented me, but doesn't the song open up with something like, tired of pretending to be, I'm feeling faithless.
Lost under the service, yes.
Yeah. So...
yeah, there's the feels coming.
And it turned into a podcast.
Yeah, look at that.
So, well, I just got back from my honeymoon. We were in Portugal. And I got to tell you, I'm sorry for anyone out there that feels differently. The food was not good.
Wow.
It was, here comes another seafood with risotto dish every time. And do you remember the one fish that I told you about earlier?
The one that I called a demon fish that was served with bananas?
Yeah, so it's a deep sea fish called a black scabbard. And it looks like an eel with teeth. And clearly this thing is not meant to see the light of day. Well, it was on a lot of menus. And it wasn't until after eating it that the next day we overheard someone talking about it. It turns out as a deep sea fish, the black scabbard is not something that they fish for. They just collect it on the surface of the water after it dies. And that is horrifying. Please, if you have access to Google right now, as long as you are safe and you're not driving, because we don't condone texting and driving.
And do not pause the podcast. You have to do this while listening.
Exactly. Black scabbard fish, Portugal, and then send me your best wishes. I will go see a GI doctor as soon as possible.
So the thing that makes this whole story crazy to me is good friend of the show, Brandon, who listens to every show. So I'm just going to name drop him. I don't care. I'm pretty sure you don't care that I name
He'll be happy.
He'll be happy. He's a part of the show. No, great guy. Spent part of my European vacation hanging out with, pretty much the entire time hanging out with Brandon. But we went on I think it was the street food tour in Prague. And I think it was the group of tourists from Iceland that were telling us about Portugal. It's either they were the ones that told us, or it was the couple of guys that we met in a Munich beer hall that were telling us about Portugal. But they're talking it up about how it's beautiful, the food's incredible.
Oh, hands down, it is the most beautiful place.
But not food.
No.
Super overrated,
especially compared to Italy. I mean, look, if you're in Iceland, I actually did like the food in Iceland, but everywhere I ate had imported food. Not a lot of agriculture there. Portugal, I mean, they're just collecting stuff off the surface of the water
really
and frying it. At least there wasn't a head on the plate. So back when I was interning at the Vatican Embassy in Switzerland, long time ago, every Friday of the year, we would not eat meat. It wasn't just a Lent thing. It was every Friday of the year. And the nuns would put the entire fish, teeth and all, on the plate. And I became a vegetarian every Friday.
I believe it.
I was not able to do that. So
well, it's kind of like me during Lent. Is I'm not a huge fish fan, which may be a surprise to a lot of people. I do like sushi, but when it comes down to like just fish, like everyone, like McDonald's, I love their marketing because every Lent time, what comes around? The fillet of fish. I can't do it. I just can't do it though.
Yeah.
So I essentially become a vegetarian.
Well, the rest of Portugal was absolutely stunning as far as the landscape goes. I mean, every single park. I have never seen parks this cool before. They gave total Jurassic Park vibes. The cliffs when we were on an island, Madeira, it's technically on the African continental plate, but it is, culturally, politically, it's Portugal, it's the EU. So it was epic. We also spent some time at the birthplace of Saint Anthony of Padua.
I did see that.
Yes, and that is the one singular way that I have prepared to introduce a Franciscan into the story today. But anyway, they were absolutely in love with him. And a really cool thing for me was his birthplace. It's only footsteps away from the cathedral, which looks like an actual medieval fortress. And of course, the culture of the time was very much us versus them. Sound familiar? Well, St. Anthony was trying to counter the culture of we're feeding ourselves. The Eucharist would be talked about in his day as we're unified as a church against the Muslims. We're unified as a church against the Moorish North Africans. They were unified against something instead of unified for something. And so St. Anthony really helped to redirect Catholicism, not only in Portugal and in Italy, where he moved to, but he helped to redirect Catholicism to something more healthy. That's going to be a major focus of this episode today. We're talking about communion laws. You know anything about that?
Oh boy, do I.
Do tell.
Oh, I mean, obviously, you have your prerequisites that you have to have before you can receive communion. You have to be in a state of grace, which means, you have to be a practicing Catholic, having gone to confession recently, and obviously no mortal sins in between then and now. And yeah, just essentially be a Catholic in what the church calls good standing. And that's it. And it's really up to you when you do your examination of conscience to figure out, am I or am I not in good standing?
Yeah, we are all called to look deep within ourselves and try and understand, are you trying? Are you doing your best? Are you placing yourself in a state of grace, or have you kind of ruptured that relationship? But and I'm saying English-speaking Catholics here, particularly in the United States, we tend to take this to an extreme.
A little bit.
A little bit. It's something that we hear about a lot. And look, it's not all for the bad. After all, canon law, the supreme rule of canon law, beyond all of these requirements and remedies and whatever, is that it's for the salvation of souls. So we're trying to challenge people to go deeper. But I think here in the United States, where we have so many different religions to choose from, we have social clubs to choose from, we have absolutely no more than 2 political parties to choose from, we start to treat the Eucharist like, okay, this is our social club. And in order to be fortified as a Catholic community in this parish, in this town, we need to have a core inside group, and then we need to draw strict boundaries and everyone else is outside. Does it ever feel like that?
But yet the message at the same time is, oh, everyone's welcome. Yeah. I mean, I've alluded to it on several past episodes about the Catholic side eye. that happens a lot during communion time when people are going up, because it is a tight-knit community in most parishes. Everyone is in everyone else's business. So it's like you're going up there and, Susie's in her front pew spot that she's been sitting in for 18 years. Susie is a fictitious character. She is not a real person. Any likes or alignments to anybody in real life is purely made up.
Coincidence, yeah.
Coincidental.
Thank you,
there's a
SVU.
disclaimer. Thank you. So Susie's over here in her pew for the 18th year in a row, and she knows that Debbie and Doug are having a hard time in their marriage because Doug's gambling problem and he's wasting money. So there's a lot of things going on there. So that side eye quickly shoots over and she gasps audibly because Doug is going up to receive communion because he has an addiction to gambling. Like, I have an issue with that, obviously, but yes, but that's just an example kind of what happens in these tight-knit communities.
I guess we have this presumption of sin about people around us. We're all sinners. I think, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, we need to move beyond that understanding of holiness as like the light switch is in the on position and yesterday it was in the off position. No, holiness is about that lifelong process of becoming everything that God made you for. And that takes time, and it is really, really messy. And we need to support one another. You ever heard someone in the military or maybe someone in corporate leadership say, "We're going to support you in failure"?
Yes.
Oh no.
That hurt a little bit.
Oh my gosh. I have never seen that look on your face before.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that after offline.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But that is the attitude that we need to have in Catholicism. And if you feel like you're in a really good spot, then maybe, which by the way, you can always go deeper, maybe your role is to help the person next to you get to a better spot. But with Catholicism, we have this presumption of sin. And someone grabbed me at the end of Mass a couple years ago and was like, "Can you believe that this parish has active homosexuals receiving communion?" What does that mean? Does it mean that they were doing stuff in the church? I don't understand.
How do they know they're active is what I want to know. Like,
I often feel like an inactive homosexual, but we won't talk about that on this episode. So, and that doesn't seem to make me any more holy than others. But anyway, let's compare some cultures here. Now, one thing that I don't think we've talked about on any of our episodes before is the fact that you are not binational. Is there a word for it? Bicultural? You grew up in more than one country.
I call it being a citizen of the world, and I don't know if there's like political backlash for
diplomatically bi-curious.
I mean, we were technically diplomats. We had embassy plates and everything. We had a diplomatic passport, which I still need to show you because it's got a really, really. It's a funny picture, I should say, is what's in the passport. I'll show you that later.
All right.
Yeah, but no, we were diplomats when we were in this country.
I guess before we dive into that, I buried the leading question here, which is, does having more strict rules, does having more stringent requirements in the church generally help the people go deeper in their relationship with Christ?
My answer is the rules are well intended to help you go deeper, but people are too literal about them. And that is where the line in the sand is. And that's the issue that I think we have in this church, in our church, in the English speaking America church kind of thing.
Okay. So that's why I wanted to bring in your binational, whatever it is. Do you want to tell the people about where you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in South Korea. My dad is a proud Navy veteran of 20 plus years in the Navy. We were stationed in Korea. We were one of the only Navy families on an Army base. And yeah, it was a great time. I was pretty much there up until my teenage years, where I moved to our lovely region of Virginia and have tried to escape multiple times and have failed.
So you weren't a Catholic when you lived in Korea?
No.
Were you Christian or attending church?
Yes. So we were attending the chapel on base, which essentially is non-denominational. They had Catholic Mass, but then they would just have a non-denominational service. So you had all the flavors of the Protestant rainbow in there, if you will. So you had your Methodists, you had your Lutherans, you had your Presbyterians, which at the time my family was Presbyterian, but it was kind of a hodgepodge of all of them in a non-denominational sense.
So my undergraduate degree was in international conflict analysis and resolution. And by the way, the resolution has not been going so well for the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is why we're having podcasts like this, because the world is getting more and more complicated. I think from your background, where you're going to be able to add the most to this episode is the fact that you are already aware of how to understand the differences in how people perceive themselves as their own identity, whether it's Korean or American. You're able to see the differences in how cultures and societies form, whether they're more conformist or more individualistic. You're able to know the enforcement mechanisms. So when a community feels threatened and they throw up some walls, these are things that you are probably better at recognizing because you've lived in a bubble in Korea, even if it was a large bubble. You've lived in a bubble in the United States, even if it's a large bubble and a more powerful bubble. So having lived in two bubbles, you can kind of see the different ways that we discipline each other in society, right? So there's a professor in the Philippines, Vivencio Bolano, and he makes a really, really political point. He's comparing Japan and the Philippines. He says, Japan is advanced. It's a developed society because it's run by engineers, whereas the Philippines, it's run by lawyers, heavily influenced by the United States. Of course, these are his perceptions, these are his opinions. But he says that people in the Philippines, because society is so heavily influenced by American law and it's run by lawyers, he says the people, they've come to perceive the rules as impersonal. And so in his book on Catholic social teaching, on social change, he's trying to understand how is it that a Catholic is called to help make society better. But he sees this real issue in the creative elements of one society and how well they're doing versus a society that's following a checklist and trying to just kind of reinforce the rules. Now, from your time living in Korea and living in the United States, like what have you come to learn about the differences in how we throw up these rules and keep the family unified? Because ultimately unity is one of the most important things about being Catholic.
Yeah, I think the one thing that when we were talking prior to recording about this topic specifically is I feel like Korea is a unique blend of both Japan and the Philippines in this example. So Korea is a very developed country. Obviously, if you take a look at a lot of your appliances in your home, if you have anything that is Samsung, LG, maybe you drive a Kia or a Hyundai, those are all South Korean brands. South Korea makes a lot of our IT parts, our chips. You know, they may not be the largest manufacturer ever, but they do have direct ties with the US. And because of the Korean War, which, fun fact, is still technically active, it's only just a ceasefire agreement because the U.S. came to help South Korea from the North Koreans being influenced by Soviet Russia and China at the time. There is a very strong connection and influence from America in Korea. So I love the example. I think the example is valid and will cause a lot of people to think, but Korea is unique in that sense. And when I say that, it's like Japan is very much, you know, there's still a society that has rules that go off of check marks, but that's because that's how, at least from my experience, is that's how everything stays in order, right?
Yeah.
It's we all do our part, and this is what happens is we have structured order. In the Philippines, and this is where I feel like they get their influence from the US a little bit, is, you know, Dan, how many times have we heard of a new law being passed? And the first thing we say to ourselves is, I don't need to worry about that. That doesn't affect me.
Oh,
A lot. right?
Unless it's a new tax, but yes.
Unless it's a new tax, but yes, but like it's very common for us here in America to be like, oh, well, I don't agree or disagree with this, or I feel strongly about this, but it's not going to affect me, so I'm not going to raise my voice. It's not my problem.
Right.
That's where I kind of feel like the issue of having that Western influence in the Philippines or being run by lawyers is it doesn't make you feel like you're a part of the community, right? It makes you just feel like there's laws to address an issue. And if that issue doesn't happen to affect you directly, then maybe you feel like the government isn't really working for you. They're not paying attention kind of thing. It's a little too, loosey-goosey.
That's so funny because there's two statues in St. Peter's Square. I'm sure you can guess who those two figures are.
Peter
and
Paul,
exactly. And Paul, I believe, I may have these reversed, but the same general gist. Paul has his sword to the ground, and he's essentially saying, the laws are made here. And Peter is pointing out, and the Italians always say, and they are obeyed out there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Vivencio Bellano, he continued on in his book. He said that because it's become so impersonal, because it's trying to adapt to European or American culture, which, there's a lot of pressure on certain countries to fit into that Western order because they want to be seen among the Western nations in terms of power and wealth and dignity. Well, in catching up to, quote unquote, catching up to Western laws, he said that the people have started to notice that the laws are no longer about our culture or our needs. It's about fitting an international status. And there's a lot of complaints about that. From my time working with the Holy See, I know they would say 90 to 95% of the day's agenda would be focused on Europe. This was 10 years ago. And the remaining 5% would be for Latin America. Well, the global south has more than a third of the Catholic population, and Europe is dwindling, but the rules are still very much Eurocentric. And in trying to fit this status, right, if we're just like trying to follow the rules and uphold a standard, it risks being about a status of honor rather than the dignity of the person. And it risks eliminating that person's chance of encountering Christ in a deeper way for the way that they were created, for the way that they were living, for the time that they were living in. And I don't know if you've noticed, but over the past several decades, the world has been getting more and more complex. The problems that people are facing are nowhere near as simple as when my parents purchased their home here in the United States for a pack of blueberries and $10. The world is just a lot harder in many ways and more dangerous. So the rules, I mean, the great thing about Catholicism is that on the whole, we've always been more or less flexible. Kind of like an airplane, the wings are made of aluminum and so they bend, but they don't snap. You want the rules to be just flexible enough that it can withstand the turbulence, but that we keep the family together. So there have been many observers that the church has hypocrites in it. I am not afraid of that. That is a part of being the human person on the journey to holiness. The question is, for people who are divorced and remarried, for people who are same-sex attracted or gay or struggling from addictions, whether that's drugs or sex or money, how do we help them encounter the risen Christ in a way that doesn't force them to stay in the pew when everyone else is lining up to receive Jesus?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I have an example I'd like to use. I'm not going to say names because of, it is a personal story with someone who was a friend back in the day. But he had an addiction. He struggled with a very common addiction that a lot of men have in the Western world, and that's the addiction to pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that he and his spiritual director worked on for as long as I've known him.
Yeah.
It's been a real issue. He's lost jobs because of it. His direction he got from his spiritual director was A true addiction is something you cannot control. If you cannot control it, you are not in the right mind to control it, to control that urge. Therefore, while it may be a sin, it's not a mortal sin because it's considered an addiction that affects your mind from reasonable thought. And I think that goes along with like the evolution of the topic of like suicide, right?
Right.
Is the church has changed on it, going like, well, if this was to occur, that's a mortal sin. This person would not go to heaven because of taking one's life. But are they in the right mind? And
that's been a very big development in the Catholic Church. And it's not so much a change in teaching, in my opinion, as it is a change in emphasis.
Correct.
And there are a couple things that really lead the church to make a lot of these changes as psychology gets better. And it is the understanding of the complexity of the human person.
Yep.
That, we're not living in a world where houses are practically free and mortgages 0%. We're living in a complicated, more dangerous, more high stakes world than anyone has ever lived. But also, besides human dignity, there is the understanding that we need to balance out how we are talking about a sin. That mercy sometimes is more important to emphasize than it is to remind someone that they've done something that has ruptured the relationship with God.
Yeah. So the point of this story is that when his spiritual director helped lead him to this information that you are in a position where your brain is not able to think clearly because of this addiction, this alone will not disallow you from going up in communion. And I mean, that was a big revelation to him. That was a big revelation to me because, again, having converted in this part of the country, that's not what I learned going through my formation for the Catholic Church. So this was one of the first times I was really challenged on something I was taught going through this process. But what I can say is my friend became even more devout after this revelation. He started going to daily mass. He started attending on Sundays. He started attending even on Saturday vigil. Like he was going as much as he possibly could because his spiritual director was like, hey, look, this isn't your fault. You're addicted to it. Society actually is forcing this like in your vision, right? And there's influence there. Your mind is now addicted to this. What is the best way to overcome any struggle? And it's going to our Lord and Savior. And because of this, this may actually help you. So he encouraged him to go back into the communion line, and he actually made strides. I don't know if he's overcome his addiction or not. We're no longer friends of that nature, but I did see an improvement on his behavior after that revelation came to light during his spiritual direction.
Well, sure. So Father Ronald Noe, who is a very notable priest in the 20th century, he wrote a lot about how sacraments are for the sake of man. It's not a prize for people to be won. It's not a, you come here if you have met the requirements. It's for your sake. And it's a medicine. And if we really truly believe that the Eucharist is the risen Lord and that he transforms us when we receive him, we should generally give people the benefit of the doubt if they are approaching the Lord, that they are doing so with a sincere heart, and we should pray for them that we are all able to receive Christ in a way that heals us. We should not be looking to police the world. We should be helping people go deeper in their spirituality rather than imposing something on them. There's another really fantastic writer, Pedro Gabriel. He had a book on rigidity, which is a word that Pope Francis liked to use a lot. And when he quoted Pope Francis in it, talking about spiritual worldliness, tongue twister, spiritual worldliness. And that's when we reduce spirituality to an appearance. So I know that was a fictional character that you had earlier. Susie, right?
Susie, yeah.
My good friend Susie. Let's run through a few different examples here. So we look at people, the way they're dressed, the way they behave, the things that we know about them.
Mm-hmm.
These are all external things, right?
Yep.
Like we are not deep in their heart. We see a man and woman, and we know that they were married in the church last week during a nuptial mass. And we now see them at communion. Are we okay with that? Is Susie going to raise a red flag?
Probably not.
Probably not. No. Why?
Because she has visual confirmation that they're not living, quotation marks, in a state of sin by probably doing what married couples do, presenting as a married couple that were not married in the church and trying to receive communion. There's a whole bunch of different things.
Look, John, I know I don't need to tell you this, but my friends who are priests in other countries in Asia and Europe and Latin America, they think we're really prude, okay?
Yeah.
Sex is part of a healthy, committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we don't have to be afraid about saying we made assumptions that they got married, had a nuptial mass, and now they are living together, having sex, and that everything is okay.
See, even you hesitated saying it. So
I did, right? It was probably because of the smile that you were giving me. I'm trying not to blush right now. Okay, but the problem with that is that we have reduced assumptions about the relationship to a legal moment,
Mhm.
a declaration where two people stood in an altar and said, "I do," last week. How do we not know that things are still perfect? Like, how do we know if things are perfect or if they have fallen into sin or if there's abuse or if I don't know, maybe they've lost their faith in a week? Like, there's no way to know.
I mean, I feel like that goes back to the original point here of like, it's that public declaration, right?
Mhm.
If they were to come to mass looking, like abuse was happening, like let's say Debbie and Tom is this couple, fictional couple, of course,
Mhm.
and Debbie and Tom are always smiling. They're having a good time. They're dressed to the nines, as the boomers would say. And then they come to mass and they're looking good. They're having a great time. And then one week they show up and one of them doesn't look so happy anymore. They can't
Mhm.
just put that smile on their face. And maybe they're not wearing their Sunday best, but maybe their Thursday evening best.
Okay.
Right? Not saying it's like
In
a
my
bad
closet,
thing, but like,
those are the same thing.
well, in my closet, they are the same thing as well. So, but let's say it's this presentation you have, and that's where the question marks start to happen, is when there's a public declaration, whether you want to declare it or not, whether your body language declares it for you, someone saw you in public and that's declaring it for you, they're declaring on your behalf, as I like to say. That is when the side eye tends to happen, is when there's that, hey, Luke saw Debbie out in the parking lot earlier,
Mhm.
and they were arguing with Tom and the kids, and everything was involved. It's all the game of telephone, right?
Right.
We learned it back in elementary school, and that's how the rumors happen, and that's how that side eye moment happens in mass.
Definitely. I mean, we make judgments about people based off of legal declarations that they made, such as getting married, but you never know. There could have been something that happened over the previous week. There could have been infidelity. We shouldn't assume that about someone, but there's also no reason to assume that because of a legal declaration. That green light, you know, that is when we reduce spirituality to a form of worldliness, when it just becomes an appearance. So, another scenario, a man and woman not married in the church, they have been civilly married for decades. So married at the courthouse, but not in the church. Does our friend in the front pew give them a side eye when they go to communion?
If you're asking me, the answer is no. If you're asking Susie in pew 1A, yes. Because if she knows it was a civil marriage and it wasn't a marriage in the eyes of the church, then a sacramental marriage, if you will,
Right.
then yes, there would be a side eye.
And again, that makes presumptions about someone without going deeper, trying to understand, okay, you have a couple, maybe by a technicality, it is not perfect according to the church, or by a technicality, it's not fully there, it's missing something, but You have a couple that has been fully dedicated to one another, a couple that is, by all standards, other standards, I should say, living a completely moral life. Well, it's kind of unfair to look at them and say, like, hey, you shouldn't come to communion. However, this is the scenario that we have with a lot of people who have been divorced and remarried. I'm going to give you one example that I heard about recently. We won't name any names, but one person wanted to become Catholic. When she was filling out the paperwork for OCIA, they saw that she had been married, divorced 3 decades prior. 3 decades prior. It's been a really long time since she did not own a cell phone when she last saw her husband. Well, the church, doing its due diligence and trying to uphold the sanctity of marriage, wanted to go talk to this ex-husband just to make sure that the marriage was properly annulled or whatever. And she was like, I don't know. I didn't have his cell phone back then. I don't have his cell phone number now. You're trying to dig up something from my past that I put it behind me a long time ago. And I thought that becoming Catholic would be another way for me to move forward towards a fully alive life. And it's being held up in the paperwork. So this is another example. These kinds of things happen quite frequently, actually.
I actually have a story for this. Now, it may
okay.
not be on the same level as marriage. When I was going through the paperwork of joining the Franciscans,
Mhm.
I was baptized, and this is a cool fact, I'll throw this out there, on a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier.
Heck yeah.
It was one my dad was stationed on.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going now.
And
you've never told me this story either.
I've never told you this story?
I don't think so, but I know exactly what the problem is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was baptized by a Navy chaplain, and the records are kept apparently in the U.S. Naval Archives, which I have no idea why, but they are. So when I came into the church, me telling them I was baptized by a Navy chaplain on an aircraft carrier was completely acceptable. No one had any issues with it.
Yeah.
And then here I am going through the paperwork for the Franciscans, and their lawyers, because lawyers are involved in everything, were not so sure about my baptism. And this dragged on for over a month.
Yeah.
To the point that I had to drive up to the Shrine of St. Anthony, funny enough, to be rebaptized as a just in case. And they had a sense of humor. I think they put the water in the freezer or something. It was cold.
Yeah.
But I had to get rebaptized with the entire order there watching, which was kind of fun. And we had a great meal afterwards because, hey, Franciscans, I mean, let's go.
Absolutely.
But yes, but because I wasn't able to produce the documentation that clearly stated I was baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that I had to get rebaptized because the way the U.S. Navy did it didn't satisfy their requirements.
As an American, I think it's both reasonable and also extremely silly. I mean, again, we have this temptation to take spirituality so seriously and so by the letter of the law that we reduce it to a moment.
Yep.
And where did that moment happen? Oh, there's no diocese when you're on the water because dioceses are for land. So, by the way, quick tangent here. The Vatican does have an office dedicated to the 2 million people who work on shipping. So they work on commercial vessels, shipping all of your goods from, I don't know, Amazon or wherever you're ordering things from. But because they live full-time on the water, no bishop. No bishop because they don't live in a diocese. Dioceses are for land. So I love that Pope Francis, and I believe Pope Benedict before him, were so good about making sure that we had priests that would go wait on the docks to meet these individuals and check on their well-being, but also their spiritual needs. So also I love the campaign that they did a couple years ago. And of course it was developed in Rome. So it was no sheeping, no shopping. Okay, back to the point. So these are important pastoral questions, and they get to the heart of whether or not we actually allow someone to be a full, good standing member of the community and to go and seek the risen Lord in communion. But a friend who's a priest brought up to me, I'll do one more scenario. You have a woman who was married in the church sacramentally. She was abused, and then she divorced out of the abusive relationship. So we're happy for her. And now she has a new husband with whom she attends daily mass. What do you think?
I'm not giving her the side eye because I'm happy for her. I'm happy that she got herself out of that situation. I'm happy that she's finding that hope and that love through our risen Lord. But again, unfortunately, this is where the Catholic side eye does come into play for some people.
So one thing that I would highlight, because technically by the letter of the law, she is not to go receive communion. And of course she feels this sort of stuckness.
Yeah.
Just like your friend who felt stuck until the priest said, listen, you're not completely free because this is an addiction. And so you should approach the Lord. Sacraments are for the sake of the person.
Yeah.
Not for the sake of upholding unity in the church, although that is an important function. This woman, by attending daily mass, is a testament to how her relationship with Christ has gone deeper. To the best of the knowledge of her spiritual director, she is living a healthier spiritual life, one that is more free because it's not coerced and it's not out of shame, but it's freely chosen, and it's positive. And so what I would say for people who are not in a state that is fully compliant with church law, that doesn't, I'm not going to just say you should go to communion, right? Saying we got to really look deep at your situation, understand, are you trying to meet Christ? Not in condemnation of yourself, but are you trying to meet him in transformation of yourself? And so are you living in a way that is aiming for God in a way that is healthier, freer, more positive, and is it stable? Now, someone did bring up to me before, you mentioned pornography, and of course, we are not placing addiction of any kind on the same level of being divorced and remarried and or gay. Those are completely different things. Somebody did bring up the point to me, well, if you're going to just allow this group to go, then we can just forget about the rules for all the others. No. I said to that person, I said, if you think that I'm trying to condone addictions of any kind, I would ask you, as opposed to a healthy relationship with another person, what about addiction is positive and stabilizing? I think gay people can certainly find positive and stabilizing relationships. And it really impresses me just how many gay Catholics, whether they're holding it deep down, whether they're saying they're identifying as same-sex attracted, whether they're just not talking about their sexuality, or whether they're openly in a relationship, really shocks me at how many are taking care of the pastoral needs of the homeless, are the volunteers that do all the readings at Mass, that are cleaning the church. It really impresses me how people who feel unwanted tend to be the ones doing all the work.
I'm not going to say that they're doing it because they feel like that's what they need to do to feel like they belong. But, you know, at some point here, the community of the church needs to remember that, yes, while the community is important, while the parish community is important, and it's important to stay together, it's important to be there for one another, we also are not called to sit here and consistently judge our fellow parishioners. At the end of the day, like you said, we're all called to have that deep examination of ourselves on a daily basis. That is a conversation between you, yourself, and God. That's not you, yourself, and God, and Susie, Tom, Deborah, Tyler, and Luke. It's you, yourself, and God. And
this parish that you're mentioning, even though it's fictional, serious lack of diversity.
Absolutely. But that's my thing is at the end of the day, like, you're going to church, you're going to Mass to better your relationship with God, to better yourself, to get yourself on the path of holiness, to get closer to God. That's what you really should be focusing on.
Yeah.
And then you need to focus on your community. What are you doing that's helping lead other people closer to God? And I can tell you right now, Side eyes, pointing, gaps, the audible gasp. Oh my goodness. That's the one thing that drives me up a wall. You are not watching a K drama on TV. You are not watching One Life to Live, General Hospital, or whatever soap opera that's gone on for way too long. You're not watching it. The actors on TV can't hear you gasp. They can hear you gasp in church. Stop it.
So we're talking to people who feel unwanted. And as
Correct.
I've mentioned on the website and in previous podcasts, a lot of people encourage me to call this theology for the marginalized.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like that struck the right tone, and I had to think for a long time about it. And I'm not saying I'm right here, but marginalized to me is a political term.
Correct.
It's someone that doesn't have a voice. It's someone that doesn't have any access to power or influence. Well, you can be the most influential person in the parish and still feel like you're not valued.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can be the volunteer that does 10, 20, 30% of all of the work of the entire volunteer corps of this parish, which, as is the case in so many divorced and remarried and gay Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
you can be doing all of that. And so technically you can steer this parish in a lot of ways, yet you might not feel wanted. And so we're talking about a deeply theological sense, what it means to feel unwanted. And going back to Father Richard Gula, who said that the sacraments are for your sake. He said that the way that we first notice moral problems, it's inherently emotional. That can be like, hey, I have a lack of peace about something I did, or I have a lack of peace about how I'm living, or I have a lack of peace about how my parish reacted to something. Those are indicators. Even if these indicators are sometimes wrong, those are indicators that there's a moral problem present. And so what he says we have to seek within ourselves and within the parish is this sort of inner harmony and wholeness that helps us to know that at least in that precise moment, as you're sitting in the pew and you're like, do I get up out of the chair? Do I walk to the front of the altar? Or do I just stay here in silence? I would say to people that if you're really struggling with that, ask God to reveal to you in that moment, are you feeling a sense of inner harmony? Are you feeling a sense of wholeness? Or is part of you and your emotions and your desires, are they checked at the door and they're out in the world? These are clues that help us kind of transcend these rules and these checklists, because ultimately we want to go deeper, no matter whether you are on the verge of sainthood or it's your first day in the church, or if you think it might be your last day in the church. We want to seek that inner harmony and wholeness. Now, John, one thing I'll bring up is in the teaser for this episode and in the last episode, I brought up Aquinas's three essential meanings of the Eucharist. The first are the outward signs. Eucharist would be the bread and the wine.
Mm-hmm.
But Aquinas really developed the understanding of the Eucharist in ways that helped us safeguard it so that we weren't getting superstitious. We weren't just like, ooh, I received Jesus and therefore I'm going to be healthy over the next week. No, he had to help us anchor our faith in something much deeper, something much more real. And so he said three essential meanings of the Eucharist. One is the outward signs. That's the bread and the wine. Two are the consecrated elements. So after the priest raises the bread, it becomes the
body, blood, soul, and divinity.
Amen. Woo, you are still wanted on this podcast.
Thank you.
So you have the consecrated elements, which is the truth. The truth of the Eucharist is that it really is the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. And the third essential meaning is the virtue, which is the unity and communion of the church. Now, for about half of Catholic history, we have not had any difficulty talking about all three of these at the same time. You could walk into a church and you could see the bread and wine and be like, oh, those are the outward signs. And then the priest could consecrate it. And you're like, well, now it's the truth. We have our Lord Jesus Christ. But at the same time, you would understand the virtue, which is it's about that relationship, not just with Jesus, not just you and Jesus Christ. It's not a two-way street there, but it's the community. It's the unity present within the church. And so the sacrament up until really the Protestant Reformation was understood as being those three things. And Aquinas was the first to really kind of like put it on paper in a deep systematic way. But unfortunately, every single time society gets more polarized or resources get scarce, we start to look for ways to divide and look for people who are different, because if this person whom I hate or this person whom I think is unworthy is able to receive the Eucharist, we have this inherent sense inside of us that it devalues the Eucharist. And that's a spiritual worldliness that we're trying to avoid. We have to do everything we can to avoid allowing the body and blood of Christ from becoming a sort of appearance that gives us comfort, but a sacrament that draws us deeper into a relationship, not only with Christ, but all in creation. And so I guess that's what I want to say to people who are struggling. You're sitting in the pew and you're like, I'm not worthy. I'm not supposed to be there. I'm not going to discard that, because maybe there's something deep down where you don't have peace about, and you should work on that and then come back. But if you're experiencing a lack of freedom, or if you're working towards that holiness, like you're trying to become everything that God made you for, don't you think that they should be able to go to communion?
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all called to do something that is pretty hard to do. And that is to live our life in the fullest, in the way God wants us to. And as humans who have a condition that we are prone to consistently fail at, yes, I feel like if you are putting forth the effort, I feel like if you can deep down acknowledge that you are doing your best to be the best person you can be in the eyes of the church, and do what you need to do the best you can, then yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we should be that rigid, that strict, not just as a parish community, but just overall in who can and can't go up to receive. Like, it's crazy to think that our Lord, that when he physically walked this earth, sought out the outcasts in society to break bread with them, to spend time and listen to them and to teach them and to show them the way and show them that love, that now all of a sudden here we are in a community trying to strive for that. And we are now taking ourselves away from those same people that if Jesus was walking the earth again physically right now, he would be walking towards.
Absolutely. You know, the church is learning, as it has over the centuries, to understand your dignity and the way that you were created a little bit better. And it's trying to understand, of course, if the name of the Father is mercy, then the church is learning how to apply that as the world gets more complicated and the social problems that we're all facing get a little bit more precarious, more, deeper and unsure. The point is, this is for the benefit of your salvation. And so, yes, the rules do help promote that unity of the church, and they keep us together. And that is an extremely important element of the sacrament. But the sacraments are for you. They are so that you can encounter Christ. Jesus didn't just leave this earth and be like, see you later, at an unknown date to be announced. He left us with his body. And that body is to be experienced in unity with others. And it is to be experienced in all of your brokenness, and also in all of the things that you bring to the church that the church may not openly acknowledge or value yet. It's a two-way street. That's why I always say your stories matter. Like, I tell people, the more the church hears from you and what you're going through, the better the church is going to become at encountering it, because I can't tell you how often. I guess I read an article of a bishop in Africa. It was like, no, it's not happening in my parish. And I'm like, it's happening in your parish. Why? Because you have humans at your parish. And so it's happening. And I don't think that we need to pretend like the path to holiness is not messy. I think we need to understand the principle of reality and know that Jesus Christ was super comfortable operating among people who were deeply imperfect.
Yeah, I feel like the idea that we can all acknowledge, I think, without anyone arguing too much, that life in general is messy. But then when you walk through the doors of your church, all of a sudden it's no longer messy. That's not how this works. That's not how life works. That's not how, that's not what God has acknowledged for us. He understands the situation that humanity is in. And the beautiful news is that he has provided us with these sacraments, with this church, with this community to help not just ourselves, but one another through this mess that we call life, right? It's very communal, but the community is only as strong as it is together.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start finding fractures in that community and you start to exploit them, not exploiting them for personal gain, but exploiting meaning you're seeking them out and you're bringing them to light for whatever the motivation is, those cracks become gigantic canyons and will start dividing people. And that's the issue, is we can't divide our parish community. This world wants us divided enough as it is. The parish community is the one place where we should be united and not seeking to divide.
I always like to imagine if I were deserted on an island, maybe off the continental shelf of Africa like last week, and it was just me and one other person. If we shared 80% of the views on things, we wouldn't be fighting about the 20% because we would need each other, right? It's only when you have an abundance of people and you're like, I'm having a hard time finding a best friend, that you start to look for the differences.
Yeah.
We need to have that framework where we need one another in the church. Pretend as if you're on a deserted island and you share enough in common with this person that it's worth not nitpicking, because you want to help them do well, because if they do well, you do well. So,
and believe it or not, real life is not a reality TV show. We do not need to judge every single person we come in contact with, right? You're not Simon Cowell. You're not over here to hit the buzzer on someone on America's Got Talent, right? We're not looking for what sets us apart from one another. We're looking at what each of us brings to the table in the community. Instead of focusing on the negative, this is going to be breaking news for some people. Instead of focusing on the negative, community would work and serve so much better if we focused on the positive and what brings us together versus what divides us. I know this is not anything brand new. This isn't something I just invented for this podcast. This is a saying that has been around since way before I was even born, right? The world has enough negativity in it. If we focus on what brings us together as a group of people, that's what's most important. You look back at the immigration waves here in the U.S., the Catholic community that immigrated to the U.S., believe it or not, Catholics in the U.S., basic history here, were heavily persecuted against, right? In the early years of this country, in the 1800s into the early 1900s. That kills me to say it that way. But like the immigration waves of the 1910s, the 1930s, 1910, 1913, around that time frame, you would hear that discrimination talk against Catholics. Catholics got by sticking together and looking out for one another. That's the kind of community we need in the church. Is we all strive for holiness. It's easier to do it in a community than it is by yourself.
Yeah, the bottom line is that the Eucharist, it's a meal, and Jesus is feeding the flock, the people, with himself. And so if you're in the pews and you're like, I don't feel like I should go up because people are staring, listen, I encourage you, if you would like, look deep down and try and ask the Lord to reveal. Do you have that sense that you are working towards harmony with Christ? Are you working towards it? Not are you perfect, but are you working towards it? And do you have this inner sense of peace? And if so, and it might be worth walking up and presenting yourself for communion. We all have things to work on. The sacraments, including confession, are really, really important ways to help us get there. But this is the fuel the medicine, really. And the idea is that we all have to help one another get to heaven. So, as we close, I always like to remind people, your stories matter for the church. Your presence helps to make us more holy. And so we at this ministry always want to be available to listen. We want to be open to suggestions if there's a particular situation or story that you feel like has not been covered and you just want us to provide some reflections on it, or you want to add your own reflections. You can go to theologyfortheunwanted.com. You can share, and we also just want to thank everyone that has already written in so far. It's really edifying to know that in my own experiences in the Catholic Church that I am not alone. I don't want you to feel alone. And so your stories matter, and we are praying for you. And until next time, take care.